Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a great musician who needs no introduction. He has been on the scene for over 45 years and has worked with so many greats from Sonny Rollins, Dizzy Gillespie, Dexter Gordon, so many. Yes, Kenny Barron as well. He is a bassist, composer, and educator. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Rufus Reid. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Preston.
so much for joining us on the show today. It's a pleasure. You know, Rufus, we know you to be the great musician that you are, but we don't know too much about your humble beginnings, how you got involved in music. I understand that you are from Atlanta, Georgia,
I was
and
born in Atlanta.
but you grew up in
Uh,
Sacramento, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. How you got involved in music. Your humble beginnings, sir.
Ha. Well, um, there was always music in my house.
Hmm.
Uh, my father, who eventually I didn't really get to know until I was in my late teens, but because he and mom had split, I was maybe 4 or 5. But he was a pianist, and mom played piano well enough to play hymns in churches, and
Hmm.
I didn't. I had two older brothers, one who just passed about 3 years ago. He played saxophone, uh, and my other brother, who's still alive in California, he plays clarinet. But I'm the only one who ever actually really tried to make a profession out of it. I mean, but the music was always in the house.
Hmm.
I've been told when I was unable to speak or walk, I was beating on pots and pans to the radio.
Right.
So, uh, but the music, there was always something going on in the house. And when I left Atlanta, which was about, I guess, the family, my mother moved with my grandmother out to Sacramento, and I was 6 or 7 years old, and then I going into middle school, I guess they call it now, would be I wanted to play the trumpet, but they were all taken, so I ended up having to a mellophone, I think a French horn for a little bit. But eventually, when I got to high school, I got the trumpet. And we didn't have money for private lessons or anything like that, but we did. The school systems at that time, we're talking about the late 50s, early 60s,
Hmm.
uh, the schools were like wonderful. I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of particularly the arts. And so we had a teacher that came every week, I think a couple days a week, and that's how I got into it and got into the band. But then there was a dance. We called them dance bands then,
Right.
uh,
Right.
um, and so I had an opportunity to learn a lot of the skills, like following a conductor and being able to read. And we used to do uh, what the plays, or if there was a musical, the, our teacher gave us that experience of being in in uh, in the pit in the orchestra, and just being a part of that whole thing. And so I remember that so vividly,
Hmm.
and that was really uh, the real beginnings of me. Because that's all I ever wanted to do was play, but I didn't even know what that meant,
Right.
actually. Uh, and then I was going to get drafted, and I was going to get drafted, so there was not either go to college or get married or go into the army, and I didn't want to do any of them. So I ended up uh, going to the Air Force recruiting office with. My mother didn't like that too tough because I was 17, so she had to sign for me. But I
Mm.
passed. I passed the audition because they said if you passed the audition for the Air Force, you were automatically put in a band.
Mm. Wow.
So that was music to my ears. And when I went home, of course, she was not very happy that I got out of line to get my classes for the college. But I said, I'll either hold a trumpet or a rifle. Which one do you want? You know. So she still didn't like it, but it was a real thing. So she ended up signing for me, and my life has never been the same. You know, it was the best because most people talk about military stuff, particularly during that time. That's not nice to talk about. You know,
Right,
but
right.
for me, I'm still here, and had I gone into the Army, I may not be here. I may not have ever played, at least anything. I don't know, but um, uh, that's so. I feel very blessed that my beginnings were that way. You know.
Yeah, yeah. That's very important too. Rufus, I'm just thinking now, looking at your career, we know you to be the exceptional bass player that you are, but you could have been a trumpet player and stayed with that. So you played trumpet all throughout school, going into the Air Force. What changed? What made you all of a sudden switch and say, I want to play the bass now?
Well, I always liked the bass. I didn't really know that I had a real infatuation for the bass. We
Hmm.
in high school we had a little group. We were called the Saints.
The
With
Saints?
little
Okay.
shiny jackets, sparkling and stuff, and it was accordion, tenor saxophone, and drums and bass and trumpet. And every time we rehearsed, we took a break. I would just go over and just touch the bass. I don't know why, but I just always did.
Mm.
And then and that was the guy I bought the bass from. Uh, 6 years later, you know, and uh, but that was the beginning. And then when I got into the Air Force, I had a lot of time on my hands,
Hmm.
and there was about eight of us who were like teenagers. I was like eight,
Yeah.
just turned 18. Um, uh, and I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I was uh, I still had. I mean, my job was to play the trumpet. The bass player in the band was really a tuba player who could care less about the string bass. And in the mornings, we were done at noon every day,
Mm.
and everybody would go to the pool hall or go to the bar or whatever, and I would go into the band room and lock myself in and begin to teach myself the bass. And I started playing. I didn't know much, you know. Trumpet player. I played treble clef, the basses and bass clef. I didn't know
Right,
what
right,
that
right.
was, you know. I mean, you know, but I knew what I liked when I heard on the records and stuff.
Mm.
And this was in Montgomery, Alabama, and so I started learning. I had been playing a lot of tunes, been in the band, so I knew melodies and things like that. And I had a book, a Bob Haggard book. It's an older bass player, uh, probably one of the first bass books out that were. It wasn't a jazz book; it was just a bass book,
Right.
and he had a picture of where your first finger was E flat. So when I took an audition, I had to audition. I had the audacity to go and audition for this band uh, in Montgomery, which was electric bass because that was I didn't have the strength or anything. And the guy says, you know, the song Misty? I said, oh, yeah, what key? He said, E flat. And I said, oh, I just found that out. I remember. And I knew what the bass was supposed to do, and I didn't know the changes, but I must have found them because he, uh, my, my ears got me out of trouble, and my ears. I mean, being able to just follow him.
So Rufus,
And
just wanted to interject real quick. Were you actually self-taught at that time? This is before
oh
you
yeah,
actually studied and went, oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't know squat about the bass. You know,
Wow.
but I learned real quick because this guy was serious. His name was Al Stringer.
Hmm.
He used to be in the army. Uh, at that time, he had gotten out of the army and he'd been there with Cannonball and
Oh,
Nat
wow.
Adderley. And he played saxophone, but he played organ, but he didn't use the pedals. So he got electric bass to play the bass. So he would just teach me he says, okay, now you learn that, now don't mess it up no more,
Hmm.
you know. And then every Wednesday, we had to go in the afternoon, and he knew how to uh, make the jukebox play without putting money in it.
Okay.
And we learned all the tunes that were being popular at that time. And so we had to learn them because Friday was people coming in to dance Friday and Saturday, so we had to be up on. So listening to the jukebox, figuring out what the bass player was playing, and then we would practice it, and that was my education.
Wow. That's incredible.
Well, I mean, when I look back now, that is really what I wish we could do now, because most of the kids of today, if they want to see a book
Hmm.
and look at a book, and most of them, would have a coronary if they had to use their ears in public. Now, I
Hmm.
mean, like when you start playing in public, you don't want to make mistakes.
Right.
And of course, because I didn't know, but this guy taught me. And then once he said, "Now that's it. Now don't mess it up anymore." So he was on me to, concentrate, and I ended up. Having a great time and learning how to play and trying to copying all the bass things that were on these records. And that's when I first heard in Birmingham, Alabama. I never forget this. Went to this. It was an all-black club, of course. At that time, that's all there was for us, and the dancing and the jukebox was
Or it's over.
I said, man, listen to that bass line. So
Yeah.
I went over and looked at the Horace Silver. Who's that? That's bad. I got to learn that. And
Right.
that was my beginning.
Wow. That's incredible, Rufus.
So
So,
to me, that's all I knew. And then it was also during the time when Ike and Tina Turner. I
hmm.
saw that band live, and I said,
Hmm.
"Oh my goodness!" I mean, they had three-horn front line, but it was powerful. It was like amazing. And then I saw Bobby Blue Bland's band and James Brown's band. This is all in Alabama now,
Wow.
isn't it? They used to call it the Chitlin Circuit,
The Chitlin Circuit, right?
And but I tell you, it was. And then I saw the first Motown review out of Detroit, and it was like the Marvelettes and the Contours and Mary Wells, and I went there with this fine lady. That's why I wanted to go. I didn't want to go to a rock and roll show,
Right,
but
right,
the band played an hour before the show started, and it was a jazz. I said, "Oh man!"
right.
And then they came out with the pop kids and the rock and stuff, and the place just jumped. But I realized, wow, those jazz guys can play that too. Wow. And so my whole world started to open up. I had records, and I used to love listening. My brother, when I was 15, he gave me my first real record with Miles Davis, the "Walking" with the
Hmm.
with the stoplight on
Right.
on the cover, and I used to try to play. I didn't know what I was doing, but I would try to play, and then I could sing all the solos, and I mean all of them. You know, Lucky Thompson, JJ, um, um, and then eventually I got shipped to Japan,
Mm,
and 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 so I had to extend my tour because it was a little. I had already gone halfway point.
right.
I didn't care. Take me, you know. And then I saw Ray Brown live, and I said, "That's it." It all kind of came together then. And I was still playing trumpet, but I was playing the bass more and more. And I wasn't really all that good of a trumpet player. Although when I left the military, I sold my trumpet and bought bass the same week.
Wow.
And I played trumpet better than I had ever played in my life because I ended up having to take lessons and get better at it. That's how
Hmm.
you got your ranking a little bit more and all these things. But to answer your question after such a long time, the bass basically chose me,
Mm,
you know. That's so that's the history there.
that's
And then I
incredible.
got a chance to meet Ray,
Wow.
and uh, that was a trip. I mean, when it was Oscar Peterson Trio, and so I saw him. I saw the trio because then at that time we're talking like early '60s
Hmm.
or 64, 65. Um, music was popping. Jazz in Japan was like amazing. So
Hmm.
and they would play these big concert halls, and I would go. A couple of friends and we would go every time. So I saw Modern Jazz Quartet. Uh, I saw Duke Ellington's band.
Mm,
Uh,
wow.
I had never, I had never seen. I saw it was Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, Philly Joe Jones, and Charlie Persip,
Okay.
and then it was Toshiko was playing piano. You know, she was the young star at that time in Japan, you know. And Blue Mitchell and Junior Cook were the front line.
Right.
And Eugene, was it Eugene Wright? Uh, I think was the bass player at that time. And man, every night there was something going on. And in Japan, like I say, the music was so revered, still is. Uh,
Hmm.
um, but there was so much activity, and then. But I met Ray after the concert, uh, and I had to wait about 15, 20 minutes because people were wanting autographs and everything. So he came out and he saw me. I was towering over the crowd because, you know, a lot of the Japanese at the time were shorter people, and I certainly didn't look Japanese. So he came out with his bass and saw me and he says, "Here, hold this." And he wanted me to hold his bass. And I grabbed it like it was, and so I held it while I watched him sign autographs and all that kind of stuff. And then afterwards, he said, "Give me my bass. What, what are you doing here? Who are you?" You know, I mean, he was so nice. And then I said, he says, "You hungry? Let's go. Let's go to the hotel. It's only a couple blocks away. And I said, "Wow." And then I said, "Can I have a lesson?" He said, "Come here tomorrow morning be here at 10 o'clock." I said, "Okay." I was there at 9 in the lobby, you know.
Right.
And I spent a couple hours with him. But he didn't really give me a lesson, but he said, "Play me something. Play me something." And I just played whatever I could play. He said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Well, work on your two finger stuff and work your scales and get that bow out." And he watched my career. We're talking now warp speed, 15 years later, maybe, because he heard me playing with Dad Jones, Mel Lewis, and then he heard me play with Dexter, and so he began to follow. He said, I'm hearing about you, you know." And he was a sweet guy. He was, but you know how bad he is. So he really put the what did they call it? The bar is like way up
Yeah, you
there,
said it
you know.
high. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and he was very encouraging about my book and everything. He says, "Keep the bass up front. You know, we're in the back, but we should be up front."
Hmm.
And I didn't really know kind of what he meant then either, but eventually I got that, you know. And but those were my, as you call it, my humble beginnings of really, because I didn't really know what that meant. That's what I wanted to do, you know.
Yeah.
That had there was a lot of stuff up in there to make that work, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Mid 70s, I guess you kicked off your professional career. Didn't you said, I think I was reading it, you started your career in Chicago or something like that?
Well, that's
70,
where it
1976 or so?
basically it started of any notoriety at all.
Hmm.
Uh, when I went there to go to finish school at
Right.
Northwestern University, and then, but it was also a city where I could actually work and make some
Hmm.
money.
Hmm.
I had been all I when I got out of the military, all I wanted was a good bass teacher, and I knew I needed to go back to school because I hadn't gone to college yet. So, so my first thing was to get a school, try to get to a school that actually had a really good bass teachers. And so, you know, I got accepted at UCLA, I got accepted at Oberlin, I got accepted at Indiana University, and then Northwestern, and all of them had great, at least at what I was told, that they had really like heavy duty bass teachers there. And that
Yeah.
was all my only concern. But of course, when I started to really get real about stuff, I didn't really want to stay in California. So I just said, okay. And then after I found out where Indiana University was, I was in a rice field somewhere,
Yeah.
a cornfield somewhere. And the same thing with Oberlin. I said, well, and then Chicago, that was a city. That was and so that was not, but that was the main reason. And then of course that was the best thing that ever happened to me. So
Now, how did you get to work with Eddie Harris? I found that fascinating. What a giant. Um, what was that like working with him, and what did you learn from him, Mr.
well,
Reid?
when people ask me who's the most influential person I've played with or whatever, and they usually think I'm going to say Dexter Gordon or something, I always say Eddie Harris
Yeah.
because, well, he lived in Chicago, and but I remember when I was in Japan, I used to have this album. It was called the In Sound. They have it's a compilation now of a couple albums, but that was the album that actually had Freedom Jazz Dance on it,
Hmm.
Ron Carter, Billy Higgins, and Cedar Walton, and this trumpet player who I never did get ever chance to meet, Ray Cardigan, I think that was his name.
Okay.
But that I wore that record out. I my friend, a piano player, he taught me. He was a brother, but he didn't know much about jazz. He knew he was a gospel piano player,
Mm.
church, but he knew a lot about the European classical piano. But he didn't know a lot about. I said, "Well, what about Oscar Peterson?" He said, "Well, I said, you don't know who Oscar Peterson is? And so he says, well, how about this Bach stuff then, you know, or and and so we taught each other, and then we used to do this. I don't know if you are you aware of the Mitchell Ruff duos, Dwight Mitchell and Willie Ruff.
No, you have to educate me on that one.
Oh, uh, uh, um, um, oh, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be off.
It's okay.
Um, um, Dwight Mitchell was the pianist, and Willie Ruff was the bassist, but he also played French horn. Dizzy Gillespie did an album with them,
Okay.
and uh, Google them. You'll find out there was a lot. They were working all kinds of places, but not in the clubs, mostly concerts. They were
Hmm.
making the money long before people even thought about it. But they made a couple of records as a duo. And so he and I would get these records, and then we would basically transcribe their arrangements, and that would gave us a repertoire. And then Willie Ruff also used to play French horn on some tunes. I said, "Wow, he plays bass and French horn. You can do that?" Wow. You
Hmm.
know. So, but that was amazing because Willie Ruff. They all lived up. I think Willie Ruff may still be alive. He's got to be in his 90s. I think Dwight Mitchell may have left, so I'm not real sure. But they were up in Connecticut because he taught at Yale for many years.
Hmm.
But we used to teach each other those things. And so I had Ron Carter and Eddie Harris on my brain. So when I went to Chicago, uh, I looked him up, and I'm still in school. And I said, "Man, I love your music. I really want to play with you. You know, I'd love to do something." And he said, "You're in school, aren't you?" I said, uh, "Yes." He says, "But you finished school. Get that over with. All this stuff will be out here. Don't worry about it. And if I still need your bass player, you got to get."
Mm.
But I tell you, because I never I talk about that a lot because he didn't just need a bass player. He wanted somebody who wanted to play with him, but he saw the value of me finishing school.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smart guy, but we were in the we were in the band together. I was with him for over 3 years. With Hall, Richard Abrams
Oh,
was
wow.
was in the band. Billy James was the drummer that used to play with Don Patterson and Stitt and
Mm.
with a organ. This guy could swing into bad health, and he was also kind of strung out a little bit, and so he was trying to clean up. And so Eddie says, "Listen, I don't care what you do on your own private life." He says, "But the moment that you can't play and you miss a gig,
Right. Yeah.
bye." And for 3 years, he was cool. And then, but Eddie taught us how to go into a studio. We used to, when he would, because he was recording on Atlantic Records at that time.
Hmm.
And so I made 4 albums with him, I think. Um, I mean, when we rehearsed or when we played gigs, if we would get in a van and drive from Chicago to California. You know, that's when you could do that. You could go for and spend a week somewhere, and then pack up, then drive another 500 miles and spend a week. And those those days are
Yeah.
been gone. But that's how you learn how to play too, because you're playing. But he was business. He says, "On Friday, I'll pay you this amount of money, and every Friday I got my money. I didn't have to go hunt for him. And you know what I'm talking about because there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of people. So, and he says, now all I need you to do is just to be on time and be able to play. And able was the operative word, particularly at that time, you know, because if you're drunk or you're strung out or you're high or whatever and can't play, bye. And he was serious. And then for me, one of the best things, his integrity was amazing. To this day, well, I'll give you an example. Say, Rufus, make up a bass line, you know, something funky. And then Ronald Muldrow was a guitar player at the time. And he said, Ronald, put some chords to that. And then Muhal, you put something else to fit in there. And Billy, you put a drum, something hip on it, on that. And I'll put a melody over the top of that.
Hmm.
But unbeknownst to us, he would put our names on the copyright.
Oh, so that's beautiful.
So to this day,
We're getting those royalty checks,
50
huh?
years, 50 years later, I get a little check,
There
a
you go.
quarter of something, you know. I mean, now at the time, I didn't even know he was doing that until much, much later. But he taught us, he says, no, you know, they don't want me to use you guys. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you know, they want me to use Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdy because they had just made the hit with Aretha Franklin because they were on Atlantic Records too.
Hmm.
So he said, well, no, Eddie, I want you to play with them, or I want you to play, you know, get Miles Davis's rhythm section, you know, with Wynton Kelly and Paul James, because they were looking to, you know, and actually, uh, it would have been pretty amazing because he would have been a lot more known than a lot of people know now had he gone with Miles, particularly or something, because he certainly
Right.
could play all that stuff. So, but he said, no, 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 those guys can't travel. Those guys can't work with me. I want to use my guys, you know, my guys in my band. But he was selling a lot of records, so he had some negotiable power to
Hmm.
go with him. So, but then he would come to us. He said, "Now, don't mess up, because I'm gonna have to pull you out the mix." You know, I said, "Oh." So he was very upfront. He practiced all the time, so you couldn't, and he'd be in the hotel room right next to you, so you couldn't be sleeping or watching TV all afternoon. You better practice, do something, you know, because at the end, at that night, I mean, we were playing 4 sets a night, you know, and hard. I mean, listen, that was my first professional gig, and it couldn't have been better because he taught me so much. He taught us how to look out for each other because we're a family away from the home, and we spend more time with each other than we did with our own families or whatever. So we look out for the luggage and traveling, and when we were, I mean, he's great, and his wife and daughters are still keeping his website and stuff up to date and
Mm.
everything to this day, and so he uh, was definitely, because I've had a great career playing with saxophone players particularly,
Yeah.
and but listen, he set the groundwork uh, for me of things that he says, now keep some money in your pocket, so because if something goes down funny, you can get your behind home. Oh,
Right.
but there's histories of people going out or coming to New York with $25, $50 in their pocket, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
I mean, you certainly can't do. shouldn't have done it back then, but you definitely can't do that now. But he was always just giving us, um, and as a professional musician,
Mm-hmm.
he he published. He wrote it. And when he gave me a check, it wasn't Eddie Harris check. It was a name of the band or the account that the band was on. And then he published books and stuff. And so that was another name. And then, of course, his personal check with he and his wife. That was so he taught me that to make the music business or music your livelihood, you're already assumed to be able to play, but how much other stuff can you handle? And so to me, he taught all of us that stuff, and I'm forever indebted to have had him first
Yeah.
to set, you know, and I mean, I can't even begin to. I could talk about him all day.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Rufus, what was it like working with Thad Jones?
Ooh. Well, that was my first uh, in New York. I had been in New York maybe about 6, 8 months. Uh, um, but I had met Thad and Mel, and they had come to Chicago. Well, I met Thad a year before in Wichita, Kansas, because I got invited to do this jazz festival, adjudicating, and he was there. And I said, wow, that'd be great. So we met. He says, where are you from? And so we've got a chance to play. He said, man, you need to come to New York. I said, well, I want to get there, but I'm not really ready financially and really, He said, you need to be in New York, Come on, let's go get some ribs, So I mean, exactly. It was just like that. So the beginning was like that. And then they came to Chicago. Then I met Mel and heard the band. And George Mraz was leaving the band. And so Mel said, why don't you come to New York? I said, well, I'm planning to come there just to kind of scope out some places to live or whatever in March or something. He said, well, give me a call. And then I did. And he said, well, uh, we got a concert on Sunday. And then you can play the concert and play the Monday night.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So I got there. The rehearsal was on the bus.
Oh, wow.
They'll give you the book. I had already known the tunes that were the test, and because he had this one tune called Tiptoe, and it had a trombone section with a bass unison thing, and it was kind of lengthy, and that was the first thing they called. So I played that Sunday and then Monday, and then but I didn't play right away until maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. And then
Hmm.
I was with the band 2.5 years with
Wow.
that, with that, before he went to Europe. And wow,
Incredible. Did you ever get a
that
chance to
music
meet his
was
brother?
so, huh?
Did you meet his brother Elvin too?
Oh yeah, and Hank too.
Okay.
I got a chance to actually play with all of them,
Oh,
and
wow.
I thought I was going to get a chance to record with them. Uh, and it was shortly after Sam Jones had passed. So they
Okay.
were going to do this recording, the Jones Brothers,
Hmm.
and yeah, no, and in fact, Dad and Mel and Harold Danko and myself, we recorded an album in Miami at the airport lounge, a live thing. And we were supposed to do 2 days, and then the guy, he says, I've got a chance to record Elvin, and I want you and Dad and Hank to do it. I said, wow, I might get famous with this one, you know. So I say, okay. So we go back to New York, and we're all three in the studios. It's like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, no Elvin. And Elvin was in Chicago.
Oh, wow. Oh,
And it never happened. And he gave Elvin an advance. So he ate that. And so I said, wow. But I did get a chance. So in other words, I thought I was going to get a chance to go down in history with an album with those guys.
right.
But that never happened. But I did record with Hank. I never really sweat with Elvin. I would love to just like play dripping wet playing with him. You know, I mean, when he was, I never had that opportunity. But we played for a half hour at the Carnegie Hall with Dad, Hank, and Elvin and me.
That's beautiful.
And he still, it was tipping. It sounded just like Elvin, but it was like really tasty and really. And so I do have those memories, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful. You know, Rufus, one of the things that I found quite fascinating about your career is how you hooked up with Dexter Gordon. It's almost like when he was in exile in Denmark. I understand that he chose you. I guess he was looking for you. Maybe he heard about you and chose you to be in his band.
Well, not really. JJ did that.
Oh,
But
JJ. Okay.
but they were needing a bass player because he had come back. You know, Dexter had been coming back, you know, every 9 months or whatever, but he was still living there. And so, but the climate started to really change in Europe. So a lot of the guys that were over there basically had to come back.
Right.
But Dexter, I had played with Dexter in Chicago, but he didn't really remember me from there. But when he was going to come back, he had Woody Shaw's band, you know, and Woody was playing, and Victor Lewis was playing, and I think maybe Onaji might have been playing.
Najee Vallancomes, yeah. That was the group
Maybe,
that they had. Yeah.
you know, so Woody said, Dexter, you can't have my band now, you know, so you're going to have to get your own band. So we were all working out of the same office with Johnny Griffin's band
Yeah.
and Woody's band and Dexter's band. So we ended up getting, well, Victor Lewis made that one Columbia record with us, with George Cables. But he was playing with Woody too, see. So Woody said, no, you can't take my drummer, you know. So we ended up getting Eddie Gladden, who had just left Horace Silver. And I got the call to do the recording, and everybody liked that. And I guess that kind of solidified my getting the gig. But for me to take the have to be a little diplomatic about this. When I took the gig, I mean, everybody, Dexter was drinking and cocaine coming out of the wazoo and the whole bit, and George Cables was indulging, and Eddie smoked reefer, and I didn't do nothing. And everybody said, well, how did you get the gig? You know. And everybody was happy I didn't do nothing because they didn't have to share, nothing, you know. And to me, it didn't seem to make sense. Um, but I did, and it ended up being. I mean, I'm still reaping the benefits of having been playing in that group to this day. And that particular group with Eddie Gladden and George and myself and Dexter was power.
Mm.
And the chemistry was like really.
Yeah.
So that that was amazing, you know. But Dexter knew about me, but he didn't really remember me from when he was playing in Chicago. I guess eventually he did it. But uh, what you were talking about, I got the gig from with J.J. Johnson because
Okay.
he used to practice with the Jamie Abersol play along records,
Okay.
and I recorded a lot of them. And so when he came back to come back to try to uh, a resurgence of his career after coming back from Hollywood and writing for films and stuff. His manager says, "Well, you know, you got to get you a band." And so initially it was uh, uh, well, Cedar did do some gigs with us and Victor Lewis, but Stanley Cowell.
Yeah. Great pianist. Yeah.
Oh, man, serious. And so he said, "Well, she said, "Well, need to get a bass player." He said, "Well, I'd like to get a bass player who plays like the guy I practice with on these play along." And he he said, "Well, let me get the album, the little CD cover." And he said, "His name is Rufus Reid," and his manager was a woman by the name of Marianne Topper, and she knew me. And she said, "Well, I know Rufus. I can give him a call." He said, "Oh." And that's how I got that gig. So I tell people, still to students, I say, you never know who's really listening to you behind you. So you got to really just do your thing. Whatever you do, just do it, you know. And but that's a true story. I got that gig, and I was almost 9 years with Jay, you know.
Man, that's incredible. That's incredible. You know, Rufus, I saw when I was just looking at some of your work, I saw a show, a concert that you had done with Dizzy Gillespie and Sonny Rollins together. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Man, what would
that
tell me
was an
about that?
amazing thing that was at Wolf Trap. That was 70. That was Dizzy's 70th birthday, and they pulled out the stops. I don't even know. Uh, we gathered in New York and got on the train
Hmm.
like they used to do in the old days when I guess Ellington and all the bands would travel the country on these trains, you know. And so we got on the train, went all the way down there. Wolf Trap, spent the whole day. I mean, they had everybody there. I mean, it was Eddie Gomez was there. I think well, Percy Heath was there. I think Ron was there, Ron Carter, and I mean, and I got invited, and Hank and uh, Mickey Roker.
Hmm.
Woo, Mickey Roker, boy,
Yeah, it's a bad cat.
bad dudes. And yeah, that was I was so honored to have been asked because I was still one of the young guys, you know. And
Hmm.
Wynton was really younger, even younger, and um, um, but that was amazing. And then it was put on. I guess what did they have these discs? These, what do they call them? They were video, but they're
You
on
talking
a
about a
disc.
laser disc?
Laser disc. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how
yeah,
it initially came out. You know.
yeah.
Uh, and I think it might have been on television for one time, but there was a lot of money there. I don't really know how that, but they had the catering, they had the whole, and we just took over that. place for the entire day. Uh, Went down early and came back very late at night, um, and it was amazing. And there's there's that really the only time I actually played with Sonny Rollins.
That's incredible. And
With,
both
with,
of them together, that's great.
yeah.
No, very few people can say that you played with both of those masters together.
Yeah.
And some of that footage is actually on YouTube, but I found it
Yeah.
fascinating. I was also curious how you hooked up with Nancy Wilson, playing with her. What was that like?
This was during the period of in the early or what when I was playing with Eddie Harris.
Okay.
Um, and there was an arranger. Oh boy, um, I can't pull his name up at the moment, but it was a brother who was um, a well-known arranger in Chicago, and so I had done some commercial little things with him, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to do an album with Nancy Wilson, and I want you to go with me. We're going to have to go to California." I said, "Man, nobody's going to fly me to California. You got Ray Brown out there, Chuck DeMonico's out there, all these bass players." He said, "No, I won't take you." And I didn't believe him until my ticket came,
Mm,
you know. And we went out there, and that was the only recording that I made with her, because I think it was called Kaleidoscope. And our names were nobody's names were on that record except what was his name will fly out of me in a minute. Um, but that was my first time of actually going to Capitol. It was on Capitol Records,
hmm
in that big famous round building in L.A. And so Shelly Manne was playing drums on some of the days. It was out there like 3 or 4 days. Uh, uh, I'll never forget it because of one of the things was that Grover Mitchell was playing trombone and Shelly Manne, and they were the only people that spoke to me,
really?
period.
Wow.
I was a foreigner. I was an East Coast guy. And I said, "I've been hearing about this, but this is deep." Huh. Literally. And Shelley, who's really was a wonderful guy, could swing too. He could really play. Um, and of course, I'm right next to him. And so, so we do the date, and I'm playing, and I'm not any of the LA guys. So they just kind of shut me down. But I said, "Oh, okay." So I just did whatever the music. But Nancy loved it, and that's how I got the gig. You know.
I also like some of your work that you did with one of my favorite pianists, Kenny Barron, one of my favorites. You've worked with him quite a bit too. Now, I was going to say earlier this year, I got a chance to catch you at the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival, and you did some work with your friend, Buster Williams. I like the piece that you guys did, and you're also in his documentary, Bass to Infinity. I
Right.
really enjoyed that. And I had Buster on the show. I mean, I've had all the guys on the show. I says, I got to get Rufus on because Cecil McBee's been on, Reggie Workman, they've all been on, and had to get you on. But yeah, I liked the stuff that you did. Now, let me ask you a question. You're also an educator too. Right now, are you teaching? Or are you doing anything online currently at this moment?
No, I mean, yes, I have taught and I'm not teaching at a regularly anymore. And it's been over 21 years now
Right.
that
Right.
I've been away. Although I was hired at the beginning of last fall to go out and work with the students at Arizona State University
Okay.
in Tempe. And mainly it was something that they had put together as a mentorship.
Hmm.
We don't have our mentors anymore. We're losing our mentors. I mean, how I learned it. We talk about Eddie Harris, talk about Dexter Gordon, talk about J.J. Johnson, talk about Bill
Right.
Jackson. But these are people who taught me how to play. Cedar Walton, Billy Higgins, you
Mm.
know, Dad, Mel, all these Lee Conans. All of them taught me what to do
Yeah.
or not. Stan Getz, you know. So we're at the tail end of an era, and I think you know that,
Yeah.
because I think right now, I don't know if you would like me to say this, but I think Ron is probably the oldest of our elder
He is.
statesmen,
No, actually,
And
Cecil is. Cecil McBee. He's 85.
Cecil, oh,
Yeah.
ooh, okay,
Yeah.
but it's like a handful of guys. I mean, Jimmy's gone now,
Right.
and uh, uh, I'm trying to think of the.
Yeah. Most of them are gone. But you know,
Yeah,
someone, Rufus, who
yeah,
I did
Hank's
speak with.
gone.
I did speak with, believe it or not, Lou Donaldson on the phone a couple of weeks ago. He's in his
Oh, okay,
90s. He's
yeah,
still
right,
going. He's
right.
still going. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Lou's
well,
like one of
he's
the only
amazing. I
ones.
mean, we're talking, but I mean, the guys who actually taught people when they played in their bands,
Yeah.
they had to play a way that they wanted them to play.
That's
And
right.
that's how you got your goods. I mean,
Exactly.
and if you stayed longer than 2 or 3 days, you did whatever they did, and they liked it. Um, um, and so I feel, I mean, it's funny. It's really funny now because I came up listening to and hearing Herbie Hancock and Ron
Mm.
and all those guys um, and when you get a little older, they're really not that far away from me,
Right.
age
Right.
wise,
Right.
and yet, like Eddie Gomez and I are about the same age, but he's almost has 20 years of experience over me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing because he was 18 playing with Bill Evans,
Bill Evans. That's right.
and I didn't start playing the bass until I was 18, which has nothing to do with anything except he was already adding on to his palette, from the experience, and you can't take that away from anybody who's been out here doing it.
Right. That's right.
So I so I took this. I accepted the work, and they said no. I don't want you to play. I don't want you to. You're not. We're not paying you for that. We just want you to come and listen, talk. Just pretty much what I'm doing right now, trying to. And then some of the students who really don't know nothing,
Hmm.
but they think they don't.
That's right.
And then it's funny, I would go and do some work. They had the Dave Brubeck Institute. And, they have the Thelonious Monk, and now it's Herbie Hancock's
Right.
Institute, or whatever. But I remember going out. I was subbing actually for Christian McBride um, at the Brubeck Institute, which was actually pretty significant players would go out there, and I mean,
Hmm.
but they were young and precocious, and so I would go out, and some of them knew me and didn't know me,
Hmm.
because a lot of them don't listen past a certain time.
Right. Right.
So I go out there and I'm I listened to. I tell this story a lot, and they played. I said, "Well, play me something," because I can't really talk about anything until I hear you play. I don't know what you guys can do. And, um, so they played, and they played, and they played, and they played. And when they finished, I said, "Is that it?" And man, this one guy had dreadlocks, and that was the first time I could see his face, but no one had ever really busted down.
Yeah.
I said, "Listen, man, what I heard was pretty amazing, but you guys aren't playing together at all." I mean, and then I just went down the line because that's one of the things that's happening now. Some of the players are playing so damn well
Yeah.
that they intimidate people to say something to them. But someone like a Lou Donaldson or Houston Person or any, they said, "What? What is that you doing? What's something wrong with you?" I mean, it was, and I mean, if someone said, an older person said, "Don't do that," I said, "Okay," but now it's like,
Right.
"You say something to me." So it's very important that the people who are in these teaching situations uh, be really, and it's not as easy as it used to be. But teaching really is good, but you got to stroke where the strokes are good, and it's really good, but you should tell them, "Well, listen, that's not bad, but you guys, you haven't even touched it yet."
Right.
And they don't understand because they haven't played.
Mm.
And a lot of it is not their fault. And that's the sad part about it, for me. Um, because I learned how to play when I was so sick I needed to go lie down in the bed somewhere, but I couldn't. I'm 10,000 miles away from home, and I just got to go on automatic pilot until I get better and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
So all, you grab, uh, but if you're fortunate enough to have people who love you enough to tell you your shit is not good, you know. So
Sure.
I mean, it's just like our parents. If they coming up, they chastise you, and you, but they do it because they love you and they don't want you to. They want you to learn from it and get better at it. And so music is not this is no different. But I have been blessed to be around. So now, when this guy asked me to be kind of a mentor, I said, "Wow, I guess I am that age where I actually have something to say."
You have a lot to say, man. You have a lot to say. Well, Rufus, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk today. It's been an honor for you to share your knowledge and your career. I'm just so grateful. Well, hang on. I don't want you to leave. I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it
Okay.
from the great Rufus Reid. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.